Welcome to Nonprofit Nuggets. I was asked recently by the president of a board of directors of a nonprofit agency whether he should start an endowment fund, in particular with gifts that came in over the holidays. I would like to share with you the reasoning that I went through in giving him the answer to his question. So this is going to start off with a definition of what an endowment is, and it's very important that we understand that in this process. An endowment, by definition, is money that is donor restricted. That is to say, a donor gives a nonprofit organization some money that says you can never use this actual money. The only thing you can use is the interest that this money generates. And that is in perpetuity. You can never use that money. So that's what an endowment is, basically. There is such a thing also as board restricted money, but if a board restricts money, then the board can also unrestrict the money, so technically that's not an endowment fund. So we have to keep that in mind as we formulate our answer to this person who wants to know whether to start an endowment fund. So I'm going to do a little math with you to help understand the answer to this question. I know most people don't do math. This is going to be very simple, very straightforward, and I've already done it for you. So we're going to start off with a couple of assumptions. Please note that these assumptions will not mirror exactly the status of your own organization, but the conclusion, I think, will be very useful. So we're going to start off by assuming that your organization has an annual budget of $1 million. We're also going to assume that this donor, or maybe a collection of people, are willing to give the organization $10,000, but they want it restricted for the endowment fund. We're also going to make an assumption that the economic environment in which we find ourselves, we have an interest rate of about 4%. That is to say, you can earn 4% on the $10,000 over a period of 1 year. Okay, doing the simple math, that brings in $400, which is all very nice. Remember, you can't spend the $10,000, you can only spend the $400, and it turns out, though, that this $400 is actually 0.4% of the annual budget of this organization. Now, is that a meaningful amount of money? I would propose that it is not. That amount of money, 0.04% of the budget, is not going to materially help you increase salaries or rent a new facility or do anything really particularly useful. It's just way too small. So let's take a slightly different scenario and assume that we actually have the luxury of bringing in 10 $10,000 gifts in sequential years, and we're going to simply let that money ride in the endowment. We're going to let it build, and let's see whether that makes a difference. So we now have $10,000 gifts coming in for 10 consecutive years. All right, clearly that's going to produce $100,000, but we're also earning 4% interest over that entire period of time. And it turns out, doing the math then, we will then have $124,864 in that endowment account. Is that useful? Well, that amount of money now is going to produce at 4%, $4,995, which is, needless to say, a lot larger than the 400. Is that useful? Well, that is 0.5% of the annual budget of the organization. Is that useful? It depends, of course. Everything depends. I think it's still marginally useful, but it depends on whether or not the organization can use this amount of money in a reasonable way. Certainly for continuing operations, probably not. Now, one of the nice things is that you actually do have available to spend, if you want to, for capital projects, for a one-time capital project, you actually have $24,864 that are available to spend on a moment's notice, because you can spend all of the interest. You just can't spend the principal. So since the endowment fund has grown to $124,864, $100,000 is sacrosanct. The rest, the $24,864, can be used for a one-time project. Of course, your endowment fund would then go down to zero, and you'd start all over again building interest. Now, the argument so far, the math basically says it would be very rare for a small organization bringing in small donations compared to its budget to make an endowment fund useful. The rule of thumb is that for an endowment fund to be useful, you need twice as much in the endowment fund as you have in the annual budget. That's clearly just a rule of thumb. It can be more, it can be less. It's a good starting place. So what that means is for this organization that has an annual budget of $1 million, you'd need $2 million in endowment. That's not likely to happen in this scenario. So my answer at this point would be to the chairman of this board of directors, you'd be better off just putting the money into a board restricted account or a savings account and not into an official endowment. The exception to this rule is the following. The donor has a right to say how his or her money is used. So if the donor says, I really want my money to be put into an endowment fund, I want a legacy, I want a personal legacy, I want to help this organization beyond my death, usually, and for the rest of the life of the organization, which it may be in perpetuity. So that person may say, if you don't want to put it into endowment, I'll find another organization that wants it. In that particular case, you might very well say, thank you very much, we will start an endowment fund, we'll name it after you, and thank you very much. And then you just use it as well as you can. And in fact, you can use it as matching gifts. You can use it to motivate other people to begin to build an endowment. And maybe someday you'll have an endowment that's usable. For example, like Harvard University, which has been building its endowment for some 300 plus years, and it now is close to $40 billion. Then you have a pile of money that you can really use. So that's the answer to my question, and that's the end of the nonprofit nugget on endowment. Please, if you like what you see, be sure and subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time.